Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today Toby Brown. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I will be linking, for those of you who really like hearing what you have to say to learn more about you, a Pioneers and Pathfinders episode, which is where I originally discovered your work, in the show notes. So for those of you who want to hear more about Toby, go ahead and, after you're done with this episode, cue that one up. But for right now, Toby, give us a little bit of more information about yourself.
Certainly. And again, thanks for having me. I enjoy these types of conversations. I always learn things. So I'm known jokingly somewhat in the legal industry as the Godfather of legal pricing. So I was one of the first people to to innovate in terms of non-billable, non-standard, billing for law firms. At the time, I was at then Fulbright, which is now Norton Rose Fulbright. And the way it happened, I may have told the story before even too, but I was in a leadership meeting saying basically knowledge management is going to become mission critical because of alternative fee arrangements, which is what we originally called pricing. And two partners rushed up to me after the meeting and said, "What do you know about this?" And I said, "Well, here's all the research I've done on it. I'm up on this. I wish more lawyers look at this." And they go, "Well, we have a client asking for it. Can you come and meet with them on Friday morning?" It was a pipeline company, and I went and met with the general counsel and negotiated a holdback success fee on a motion for summary judgment matter, which we won the motion, got a success fee. And then word got around in the firm that Toby knows about this pricing stuff. And so at a point, I went to my boss and I said, I'm not really doing knowledge management anymore. Everybody wants me to do this. And so they gave me the rope, and I basically from whole cloth created a pricing program at Fulbright. And I still fondly remember and jokingly refer to it as the only fully functioning law firm committee I've ever had. Yeah, I know. I had 4 partners, and they represented practices and geographies within the firm. And when someone would submit a request, and ultimately we ended up calling this non-standard. And what it was anything that wasn't hourly, or if it was hourly above a certain discount threshold, then it had to come for approval through this committee. But we could move things like this. And so that pretty quickly just shoved me, like I said, before I created a program, I went in front of a client. One of my golden rules is lawyers will do anything to avoid talking about fees. And so pretty quickly, and I was still blown away. I remember once I went to, it was an offshore oil field and services company, and I went alone. And I can't believe the partner didn't come with me. We're like, "Sure, you want me to go along?" It's your client. And they're like, "Oh, no. So I go and learn all this stuff because unlike them, I ask questions and then I let the client talk. Because what I want to learn, and this is key to pricing, I have to understand what their needs are relative to pricing in order to come up with an effective win-win pricing. Absent that, like every lawyer, especially in the early days, they're like, "Oh, we did a fixed fee on this kind of matter before. Let's propose one to the client now." And I'm like, no. You have to understand what the client's looking for, because I literally had one client where we had 2 different patent litigations going on at the same time with 2 entirely different fees because they had different goals for each of those cases. Mm-hmm. So this all mushrooms up. I end up, Vincent and Elkins pulled me away from Fulbright. I was a little embarrassed. I was only there about a year, but Aiken Gump came after me. They're like, we didn't know that you existed. Now that we know, we want you. And they put me on a chief path. So from there, that's where my world really expanded out from pricing into legal project management, practice management. At Aiken, I took over e-discovery. So what I ultimately became, that my boss at Perkins Coie, the last firm I was at, called me was the prophet of profit, because I am brought in to fix things, or they point at things and go, can you fix that? And I'm, yes, I can. And I'll make it more profit focused. So I've done everything from lateral partner acquisition, which I pivoted from a recruiting mindset to a financial mindset, because that's what it's like an M&A function. I mentioned e-discovery. At Perkins, I had a client relationship group, which I won't go into the details of that at this point. Client innovation. Actually, I oversaw the paralegals, and I ran the pro bono program for a while. So I run a lot across the spectrum of law firms. About a year and a half ago, a little more than that, I decided to leave Perkins and form my own consulting practice, which is called DV8 Legal Strategies. I'm also affiliated with the company, which we will probably talk about what they do, is NextGen LPM, which is LPM coaching for not just LPM professional, but for lawyers. Because we'll probably get into this. If lawyers don't know how to scope, there's no way they can practice. So that's a little bit of a rambling background, but gives you a sense of my skill set.
It is quite a background, and I feel like I could take so many of those threads and we could talk about any one of them for the next 40 minutes or so, but we'll have to pick and choose. But even a little bit more, just to give even a little bit more context to color this, is let's start with the when. Like, when did that all start for you in terms of like a timeline?
That was about 2008, if I
Okay.
remember. And then 2011 or 12, I started the first real pricing conference. Then it was called the P3 conference. And depending on my mood and how many drinks I've had, the P stand for different things, but that was all pricing is the lead. That conference, we held it, for 7, 8, 9 years, I forget. And originally I affiliated with the Legal Marketing Association, but we grew big enough where we split off and became our own organization, which is called the Legal Value Network. And it's not just pricing, although that might be at the core. It's kind of all the things we've been talking about. Oh, there's one other relevant thing I started going on 9 years ago. I would talk about, when I give talks about pricing and scope, everyone would go, oh, task code is task code. I assume you've heard of or maybe familiar with the ABA task codes. Well, those were created for one reason, and it wasn't pricing. But everybody thinks there's gold in the data. All you have to do is look at the task codes, and that will tell you how to price a matter. And that is, can I say colorful words? That's complete and utter bullshit. You want to edit that out, you can. And so I would talk about that in a lot of presentations to people. And what I was doing was warning anyone going into pricing, don't fall into this trap. Because I did it over and over. I finally was like, I still remember I was at Aiken, which is after reading, I went to Aiken down. When I said, I'm not going to look at old matters anymore, because you think there's some magic in there, and there is not, and it's a waste of time. So people then were like cornering me and say, okay, well, what should we be doing? And I said, well, you should create a data standard or a standards body for the legal industry, and because it needs to be a separate entity for IP reasons and all kinds of other reasons. And they said, okay, let's do it. And I'm like, this is not as easy as it sounds. And I said, you all need to commit to this. So they all committed to it. And 8 years later, I'm the only one still there doing it. I'm the president of the board of an organization called SALI, which is Standards Advancement in the Legal Industry. You can put that in the show notes, SALI.org.
We've had Damian Reel's been on the show, so he's talked a little bit about SALI, yeah.
Damian is my architect. He's the one, well, we had a standard version 1.0, and then he became the architect for 2.0. And that standard has become very comprehensive. So yeah, Damian is a smart individual. Yes.
So just a little bit more context. So at least according to LinkedIn, your background is in economics, and it's not on there. So you tell me, are legal professional, but are you like a licensed attorney, or did you go to law school, or like what is your background there?
I did not go to law school, actually, and in undergraduate, I was aiming to go to law school. Mm-hmm. And that's to give you the sense of the full spread of my legal industry career. So I'm like a sophomore in college, and I'm like, I'm going to go get a job. And someone says, oh, you can get a job as a messenger at a law firm. And we called them runners back then. Oh, yeah. Literally, I still remember, 4:45. Here, we need to file this in the district court. I would literally run the 5 blocks and get it filed in time. But once I saw what lawyers did for a living, I'm like, this is boring. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this. So I pivoted to economics. But I worked for Home Robertson as an undergraduate, and I went back for graduate school. I was actually on a path for a PhD, but opted into the master's because I saw how boring professors' jobs were. But when I was done, I knew the legal industry, because that's the one industry I'd been immersed in. So I worked for the Utah State Bar. And at the Utah State Bar, I started, you see it here, I started their CLE program. So I built it. And as a consequence, I learned about almost every facet of law you can imagine. No, I don't know how to practice law, but I can talk about, obviously discovery, because I ran a discovery, but I can talk about litigation, I can talk about regulatory stuff, transactional stuff, all kinds of different stuff. So I have a very broad-based knowledge of the law, which helps dramatically with all the other stuff we're talking about, pricing and such.
Right. And people like Damien aside, who is a licensed attorney, I think longtime listeners of my show know our most valuable guests have been not licensed attorneys, but like contributing in some way to pricing or something for law firms and for alternative fees, because even though we've been working for law firms forever, like there's still something about not suffering from that functional fixedness of like time equals money and like coming up in that space. Did you ever have to bill time even like in working in law firms?
I did for a while. I had a quasi paralegal role at Home Roberts. I worked at Home Roberts 3 different times. Great firm. They were snapped up by Brian Cave a few years back. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I did, and it was not fun. Related to what you're saying, though, I have hired many times someone who was formerly a practicing lawyer, which Damien falls into, but he didn't do it for a long period of time. If they've practiced for too long, I can't fix them.
That's what the podcast is for, Toby. Now you could just say, go listen to 100 episodes of Law Subscribed, and you'll hear from lawyers and pricing experts to get you out of the mindset. Because I feel like you can't fix them in the time you have available and what you need to do. But like if somebody puts in the time, like you could become like a great weightlifter if you just put in the time to training, right? So it's like, I've got hours and hours of content now that folks could listen to specifically on this topic. So you could just put them to task now. That's the goal with the podcast, Toby. Be like, I can't fix you, but go listen to every episode of Law Subscribed. And after you've done that, come back and we'll talk about having you work here or work for me.
Well, thank you for helping people fix themselves. Part of it, I guess my advice to your audience would be, don't get dogmatized. Mm-hmm. Because once you've been, sucked into that vortex and you think this is how shit happens, you're in trouble. Because I have exceptions. And one of my best exceptions was wonderful person I hired when I was at Vincent and Elkins, and she followed me to A.Q. Gump and to Perkins Coie. She had been a practicing lawyer and was a litigator for a number of years, but she did not fall into this trap. She's an absolute exception, and she now runs recruiting for Jones Day. She's very, very good at what she does.
Yeah, and the people who get it just get it, right? Like I'm doing more speaking engagements now. I'll guest lecture at law schools, and one of those got recorded and replayed for future classrooms, so I didn't have to keep going and speaking because I'd spoken for this one professor a couple of times. And one of the law students recently just reached out to me, and she was like, what you're saying makes so much sense. So some people do just get it. Like they get that time equals money is not necessarily the most profitable way to do things. And it's not going to be, like you said, it's not fun. Lawyers are not having fun billing time, even if they enjoy practicing law. So that brings me back to, I want to learn more about like what you're doing now. And DV8, for those of you who are just listening in, it's very clever. It's, D as in dog, V as in Victor, 8, the number 8, but it's DV8 as in don't bill your, do something else, right? So tell us a little bit about the inspiration of starting DV8 and what you're doing there.
Well, this story is going to take a turn you might not expect. So You're spot on for how I came up with that name, because I was like, everybody's doing things the same, but you can't expect what's the old saying, work twice as hard doing the same way, whatever that saying is, like, they'll be fooled by that. And so if you want to succeed, you need to deviate. And so I left Perkins thinking, oh, I've built all these cool things. Now I'm going to go advise people on how to do the same, both on the law firm side and on the legal ops side, because I've met tons of legal ops people. In fact, a program I created at Perkins Coie called the Client Advantage Program. And what it was when an ops person called me with a problem, like Zillow was a client at Perkins Coie, and they were going to implement eBill. And they said, what should we do? And I said, well, I got people certified on 28 different e-billing systems. I'll give you a free hour with them, and they can talk to you the pros and cons of each system. So I've had a lot of touches on the legal departments. I have not done much consulting on the legal department side. And where I have talked with them, I'll just say it was frustrating, because they are, a guy I know who was a director of legal operations, said we're unnecessary, what did he call it? Whatever, he was the cost center of a cost center. That's pretty much how he said it. And so they don't have a lot of resources, and they don't have a lot of pull to get things done. So I've done more on the law firm side. Lately, what I've been advising firms on is pricing, obviously, but the impact of Gen AI on the legal business model is a new one, because everyone is just freaked out, as they should be, about what's going to happen. And I'm actually using my 2 economics degrees as part of this. But here's where we're going to take a left turn. I decided to go back to a law firm. And here's why. As a consultant, I thought I would like this. I don't. I don't get to build any. I just get to advise people, and it drives me insane, because have you ever been in a big firm?
Always small law. Thankfully.
Okay, at a big firm, there is always some crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And my old boss had the phrase, which I appreciated, was the urgent always trumps the important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm advising them on very important things, but we've got to deal with this. It's part of the conversation. We're living, we have to renegotiate our biggest lease, blah, blah, blah. So obviously I couldn't take it anymore. So I thought, I'm going to go get back in the game. And so I'm actually a finalist for a COO job at a AmLaw 700 firm. And I've recently started talking to another firm. We'll see what happens there, for an innovation officer role.
Well, then I'm glad I got you when I did. And these episodes get recorded in advance. And so at the time of publication, you may very well on your LinkedIn. So link to Toby's LinkedIn in the show notes. So click on that and see where Toby landed as of listening.
The other thing about Catch Me Now, I can say anything. At a firm, I can't do that.
Right. It's good timing. It's good timing for me and for the listeners. Someone else who came to mind because of what you're doing is Jeff Carr in the ACES program. Did you ever?
Jeff's a good friend. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's been on the podcast, and it's a little disheartening to hear how difficult it's been for you with the legal ops folks, because his opinion of it was, anyway, like, the change really needs to come from the client side, from like the in-house teams, and then you're going to see more, at least with regard to big law, changes in how they price their legal services. You have a similar opinion of that?
Yes, but then both Jeff and I have got, bloodstains from hitting our heads against brick walls. The last time I had lunch with Jeff a few months back, I asked him kind of point blank, and we came up with a saying, and the saying is, nobody makes general counsel by saving money. Because I asked him that pretty point blank, and he paused and he goes, "You're right, Toby. They give a shit. Yeah, they always talk, we got to control costs, but and the other thing about legal is there's no discretionary legal spend. It's like, you can't go to the corporate, sorry, this isn't in my budget for Q4. It's like, no, you've got to pursue it. If the business unit comes, we got this deal, or the business unit says, we're going to do this, you got these regulatory issues, you got to do it. And the point is that the way you move up, and Jeff confirmed this, was that good legal outcomes. And I've seen this, in fact, when I advise lawyers on their rates, and I think everyone's like, oh my God, how can they keep raising their rates? And frankly, I don't think they've raised them enough, to tell you the truth. Most firms, when I talk to them and look at their rates, they're in disarray and they're below market. But the data shows, this is from Pursuit, which is a software that legal departments use to get bigger discounts in our law firms. No one ever picks the cheapest. You know which one they always pick? The second most expensive. And that is a telltale that is like, we're not going to risk our career to save a few bucks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We won't go to the most expensive because we know the optics of that, but we're going to go to the best firm we think we can hire. And I would tell lawyers this, consultant, oh, Toby, you don't understand my clients. And I'm like, okay, I was a client. I may have purchased 2 divorces, and both times I did not want the cheapest lawyer. I wanted the most expensive lawyer I thought I could afford because outcomes matter. So I'm like, even if there's no lawyer, if they don't have a legal department, it's the CEO or the CFO, they're going to be in the same boat. They're going to go, no, I don't want to risk the company and hire a cheaper lawyer that doesn't know my business or is not at that level. So when I hear all this, clients are going to, start, I'll give you another fact to it. I won't name the company. It's a tech company, large one, about 1,200 lawyers in their legal department. 650 of them have independent purchasing authority. No other department at that company would allow that to happen. They would not allow someone to hire, on $250,000 engagement. You would have to have a scope, a statement of work, and a budget. And they don't do that. They don't do. So just, the clients should be asking for this, but they're not. Change will come. More questions?
Yes. Well, just a few points I want to state, based on everything that you're saying, right? So I practice a little bit of real estate law. It's actually been the area of law I've practiced the most since graduating from law school, over 10 years ago. And this real estate broker who I often work with, we share some of the same clients. She has said the same thing to me many times, where it's whenever they're bidding on work for a home, if they're trying to update it to sell it or whatever, after they sell it, to improve it based on what the buyers want, she will always get at least 3 bids, people that she likes, and she's maybe even gone with some of the contractors before, and she always picks middle bid. And for sort of the same reasons you were saying, right? Now and I think part of it's human psychology, but part of it's economics, and part of it is, you don't want the cheapest doesn't necessarily always equate to worst, but there is if there's other factors that contribute to here's the reasons why they're charging more. I think you're onto something there. I think context matters, and I'm sure you agree, because like in the legal industry, there are many markets that would pay for legal services that don't, because they can't pay for expensive, unknown billable hours. So at least in the big law space with institutional clients, I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the reasons I literally try to be the most affordable lawyer in the United States. And the outreach I get from potential clients that I can't help because they're in a different jurisdiction, I think speaks for that. I probably am. That there's huge market opportunity there. But going to the subscription model, curious to see what you have to say here, is if you, the law firm, have, say, good, better, best pricing. Here's the scoped legal services A, B, and C, and you have cheap, medium, most expensive pricing. Now they're still picking with you the middle price, right? So that's how, at least for small law or for other law firms to think about, that's a way they could price to achieve the same result that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's something that's completely upside down in our industry. It's in the big law space, I'll say, because the law firm will go, here's our rates, and the client go, I want to negotiate a discount. In any other business, you go, here is the price of our service. And the client goes, okay, yes or no. The client will go, I'm buying a Mercedes, but I don't want to pay that much for a Mercedes. So I want to pay Chevy price on a Mercedes. Car dealers go, no, we don't do it. But we do it that way.
But Tesla has Model 3 for the cheaper car. They have the X and the S and the Y if you want to pay for a more expensive car too. So right there.
Yeah. Okay. So in my consulting practice, if I went and they said, okay, well, you do X, and I say, okay, for me to do that, it's $20,000. And they go, well, we don't want to pay that much. I can go, okay, let's talk about the scope. Because if we can adjust the scope, I can get the price to where you want it. And that's what the conversation should be. In fact, even in big law, what the partner should be doing when they're talking to a client. Let's say it's a patent litigation that's going to be 1.5 in fees to the trial, which is a fairish number, depending on the science, blah, blah, blah. But what the partner should be doing is saying, okay, here's what happens at the beginning of a litigation. And here are all the factors that will impact the fee. And it's how much information and discovery, how active is the motion practice going to be? And then at each point in the engagement, like because I ran eDiscovery, I saw this happen all the time. The amount of data in eDiscovery can double in an instant. Obviously, that's going to change the fee, but the lawyers don't go to their clients and go, just so you're aware, there are ways we could contain the amount of data in discovery, but there's risks if we do that. What do you want to do? And then the client would have said, okay, let's proceed. And then in 3 months, when they get billed, that's a lot higher. They're like, oh, we talked about this. That's not what happens. The lawyers just in 3 months, the clients get the bill and they're like, what the hell's going on here? And then the lawyers go, oh, remember when the discovery doubled? And the client's like, well, yeah, but you didn't tell me what was going to happen. And now the CFO is screaming at me because we didn't budget this in Q3 for this activity. So lawyers would just do themselves a huge service if they would just have these conversations. But what was my first golden rule I told you? Lawyers don't like to talk about fees.
Yeah, and which is why they should hire people like you or somebody else who's a lawyer comfortable with it, or is not even a licensed attorney but knows everything about the legal industry to talk about fees for them, right? And that is like my whole thing is like, and you talked about how attorneys are seen as cost centers, right? In a lot of ways they are, but I try to view myself as a profit center, and this is like even my pitch, and it goes into what we're talking about just now. Outsource, right? If you, the small business owner or the solopreneur or the freelancer, if you don't hire an attorney, you're doing all your own legal stuff instead of doing what makes you money in your business, right?
Exactly.
And so by offloading at a reasonable ongoing fee, because legal is never going to stop. It's the operating system of society, right? Everything that we do, law touches it, right? This conversation is a legal conversation. I made you click a button that says I have some limited non-exclusive rights to use your image and likeness for the podcast, right? Everything is legal. And so offload it to me so you could actually make more money, right? So like I try to recategorize my legal services as a profit center for you, the business owner. And maybe that's easier to do when you're on a much smaller scale. I don't know, but I have to imagine it's like, even with complicated patent litigation, there's got to be a way of, controlling cost and reframing it to this is actually how you're going to be more profitable because we're going to take X, Y, and Z actions. And if it's not based on the billable hour, they might be able to take more creative and clever actions in litigation. I mean, have you seen anything like that?
The beginnings here and there, but this is actually, we're going to cover some new ground that I've never really covered before. So I think the fact that I told you there was a tech company that had 1,200 lawyers, I think that is a symptom. Everyone should be going, what? Why would a tech company have 1,200 lawyers? That's utter insanity. They should be hiring programmers and engineers, not lawyers. And we all know the lawyers are not cheap. And so what it is a signal that the market is failing. What should be happening is that company should be outsourcing absolutely as much of that as possible. I mean, you still would need some in-house lawyers for a number of reasons, but the day-to-day grind of reviewing contracts or whatever these people are doing should not be it should not be inside the company. It's not, they're not a law firm, but guess what they are? And if you look at the growth of lawyers inside clients versus law firms, the growth inside clients is far outstrips. I mean, way outstrips the growth of lawyers in law firms. And to me, that's just the signal. But what it's a signal for? Opportunity.
Yeah.
In fact, I went when the Gen AI came out. A friend of mine, his name's Pratik, he's at Elevate. I'm like, dude, your day has come. He's like, what do you mean? And I said, you can take that and build services and basically go to client legal departments and say, look, you can get rid of 30% of your department. You'll outsource it to us. We'll do it like at 20 cents on the dollar. You'll have consistency, you'll have quality, you'll have standardization, because most in-house legal work's at the bottom of the stack. It's not the most sophisticated, it's the least sophisticated. I'm like, dude,
right.
It's your day. Go steal all this, or, displace all this work. But firms just above that could easily do it. I'm going to take your subscription model and move it just a little bit. I started doing this at Perkins Coolidge, a great success, a portfolio fee deal, like what you could do. And most companies that have patent litigation, it's an ongoing issue. They get sued on patents. And so they will always have a portfolio of patent litigation. A smart firm could go in and go, look, we want to fully understand your patent portfolio. We want to understand your risks. We want to be way ahead of this so that when you get sued, you know, we can resolve this better, faster, cheaper. And we want to know your business. We literally want to embed with you inside your business unit. So when this stuff happens, you're like this on it. That would lower the cost. Then the firms would be in a position to, re-engineer, re-staff, because it would change the way they would approach those types of matters. And they would look at it on a volume basis. One of my sayings is volume solves a lot of problems, because then you've got sort of the flow of work, the flow of revenue. This is a phrase law firms don't fully understand. It's called recurring revenue, which every other business in the world craves. And there's so much work in the middle of the stack. Now, the cream work at the top, that's going for bath and stat and and whatever. But the core part in the middle, there is so much opportunity to go into a client and say, look, if you will give us a volume and you trust us, we're in your queue, you use us for this sort of stuff. In fact, I can talk about this because we won the ACC Value Challenge Award. In fact, I'm having drinks with the lawyer from 7-Eleven on Wednesday when I'm in Dallas. She's a delightful person. But we ended up getting a portfolio of work for them, and we innovated with them. And that we reduced the cost per matter for them by 18%. They got way richer data on their work because they were getting no data before. And now they were saying, okay, here's how many contracts, here's how long this contract spends in the queue. Here's how many of this type of contract is abandoned, never signed. I mean, we had all this rich data, and they're like, in fact, I remember talking to the general counsel. She goes, finally, I can do pretty graphs at board meetings. she goes, I'm actually able to clearly communicate the value of legal to the business. So I think there's so much opportunity to do that. But a firm would have to think a little differently how they approach it and how they partner with their client.
Yeah. That bottom of the stack, less sophisticated legal work is still a massive business opportunity for law firms. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I like to say I do the unsexy legal things. And don't get me wrong, when you think you want to be a lawyer, you don't go to law school thinking you're going to be doing everyday vanilla contract stuff. But it's actually extremely valuable for clients if they don't need to worry about the everyday vanilla contract stuff.
It's how they run their business. It is absolutely critical to them running their business. And I call it sort of middle and into the bottom tier, the run the business stack. It's like if a tech company's gonna, announce a new offering, whatever it is, they've got to run through privacy regs, they've got diligence, they've got all these things they need to do. Man, you want to be the one that's there doing it for them. And if they can't do that, they can't run their business. They can't make money. Yeah. It's really important to the business. Now, the cream ones up here, those are the bet the company. And in fact, I finally had one client, and this is an insurance company that actually doesn't exist anymore, but they had their budget carved out. They had a $25 million budget for the unexpected bet the company stuff. And then the run the company was $250 million. So which piece of the pie do you want?
Right. And if you're in that $250 million pie, you prevent things from rising to be cream. I mean, it'll never be cream. But there's always going to be that bottom of the stack stuff. It just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. It's like a never-ending source of revenue for the law firm and things that the business doesn't want to deal with. And so it's always going to be there, as opposed to the cream stuff, which, I mean, look, legal marketers, I'm sure you've heard it, Toby. They're like, we wait till your client's problem is so bad. They have no choice but to say yes to your very expensive fee. And a lot of lawyers bought into that. And so they're only looking for the big, expensive cream, type things to serve. But it's a red ocean. All these lawyers are funneling towards that area.
Yes.
Man, there's so many. I mean, time is eviscerating here, and there's so much to cover, and not enough time. Speaking of time, yeah, I mean, high volume cases, insurance, foreclosure, debt collection. There's a lot of opportunity there in litigation for these portfolio things, as you said. When I was at an insurance defense firm, and I was designing the subscription model that I ended up adapting in some ways, less so now, but for litigation back then was give us, it depends on the insurance carrier, 0 to 50 cases, and it's, a flat fee with X amount of ongoing subscription pricing as the case goes on plus costs. But if you give us 51 to 100 cases, it's X minus 5% or X minus 10% of that monthly ongoing fee. The flat fee is the same, the costs are the same, but that monthly ongoing fee. So you're incentivizing them to give you a larger portfolio, to use the terminology that you're using, right? So there's like opportunities there to incentivize, okay, send us more cases and we will actually give you an additional discount. And that's with subscription and flat fee pricing. Have you thought about that? What do you think about that kind of model?
Absolutely. In fact, you remind me, this is when I was years ago when I was at Fulbright. I negotiated this with a company that was buying I'm not going to say the industry. They were buying up family-owned businesses and basically rolling them into their business so they would have a national-based business in that space. So they were constantly in acquisition mode. And so what I did, and this took a lot of talking to the client to get them comfortable with it, is I came up with a fixed fee per acquisition. It was not that hard because these were all very similar acquisitions. And in fact, the wild card was always the target. Depending if they could drive the fee. If they were typically not aggressive, but stupid or ignorant is a better word, because they don't know how this works and they would ask a lot of very basic questions that would run the meter. But in any event, come up with a fixed fee. And then I did exactly what you said. I said, okay, if we get I forget what the cutoff was. This was like a 300K acquisition because there was a lot of diligence and stuff like that, but whatever. So I was like, if we have 5, they're at this number, the next 5, it drops down 10%. And so I said, for any year, the more of these you give us, the cheaper price. It took a lot of work with the client. So they finally went, okay, we see what you're talking about. Yes, we're in. The problem you have with that is that most clients, I still remember this was an energy company. I want to say it was a pipeline company. I still remember the woman's name, Stephanie. She was the general counsel. And I said, we can't do this on a fixed fee. And she said, absolutely not. And I'm like, why? She goes, well, I might pay too much. And I'm like, there's an equal, probably greater chance of the opposite. Well, help me understand why. And she said, Toby, I know how to evaluate billing rates. And then I have team members that are very good at reviewing and evaluating bills. She goes, I know how to do that. I don't know how to assess a fixed fee. So people, and you were saying it, I wish clients were more proactive, but they're not. And I think it's going to come from the law firms finally saying, okay, we're going to start billing it this way. But we're going to have to find a way so that you're comfortable with a fixed fee to say, okay, that's a fair fee for this engagement.
Right. Because that assumes, this is a term I did not know until maybe the last 6 to 8 months. That assumes a shadow bill. Like you're still tracking hours with that fixed fee, which a lot of law firms pivoting to fixed fees or subscription or combination are not tracking time anymore. Or to the extent they're tracking time, it's how do I spend less time doing these things? Because then you're more profitable. I'm so glad to hear you say that, though, because I've just speculated, a little less so with Jeff Carr when he was on his episode. But I've done a lot of speculation that it's the sunk cost fallacy. We've built out these systems. We have these key performance KPIs of, billing and reducing bills. And we like literally employ, like I'm thinking the insurance companies, a department of people that their only job is review legal bills. Well, think about all the savings you could have as a company when you no longer need to pay. Like, I don't want anyone to get fired and lose their job, but pivot them, use those skills into a different role in the company that actually makes the company money, instead of just trying to save like nickel and dime the law firm bills here and there, right?
So I'll give you 2 sides of this. One, AI is going to displace those people's jobs, obviously. Yeah. But there was a partner at Aiken, his name is Tom. He was genius on this stuff. He would actually teach his associates how to write time entries. He said, this is the sort of language that this client will accept. But he would also provide a summary on every invoice and say, for May, here are all the things that we did during May. There was a hearing, there was whatever it was. And so the clients, they were like, okay, we don't we know what we got, and this is amount is fair for that. And so I don't have to go read this paralegal's time entry from May 12th because there's so little value in that. So I think there is a way, if law firms were just a little smarter, where they could go, here's what, in fact, with AI, I'm working with Greg actually from the Three Geeks and advising him to be able to use AI to read an invoice and then generate the summary.
Yeah. I mean,
the lawyer wouldn't even have to do it. They would want to edit it and read it.
Yeah. And I've seen some of that with like at like ABA Tech Show, like some of these LPM providers are like, they're preparing for that kind of a world. And I think that world will be there, but it will be brief, right? Because eventually the Gen AI of it all is going to make billing time just not the most profitable way for law firms to make money. And so the need for that tool will eventually not be there anymore, even if in the short term, and short term could be 10 to 20 years, right? The 100-year, time horizon, it's not going to be a useful tool anymore. But at least in the short term, I think it could save companies a lot of money of time of evaluating bills.
Well, yes, but so in a large firm, and this is the profit talking. My cost to deliver is hours. That's my cost. So I don't care, I could be a completely fixed fee firm, but I still need to know what was our cost of doing this path. What was our cost of doing this M&A deal? Now, the time entries can be far more generic. And in fact, there's a lot of like Intapp's time, it's called Time Capture, if I got it right, probably didn't, but it basically monitors all the stuff you do during a day and then says, here's our predicted time entries for today. Mm-hmm. So you can really get it down to a basic thing, but I do need to know how much it costs us to do that. Or I don't know the cost or the margin on my products, which think about that. If you're a company that doesn't know margins on your offering, now in yours, you're in a different space because of a subscription model. Right. But if I'm doing engagements with a client, I do need to know whether I'm making money. And a critical part of this, which most lawyers at most firms do not understand, this is a profit 101 for law, is that profit doesn't come from partner time, it comes from non-partner time. It's this old capitalist thing where workers work and owners benefit. But I can see AI driving partners at large firms to the opposite conclusion, where they'll say, oh, I don't need as many associates and they're overpaid, whiny, problems for me to manage. I'll cut it in half how many I have, and I'll use AI to do that work. Well, not only will that cut the fee, it will cut the profit margin on the work because they don't know this. They don't understand.
Unless the value of the product that they're delivering is still valuable and they're not billing their time, then it doesn't have to cut the profit. And those associates who are cut because the partners are using AI, they could very cheaply go start a solo practice subscription law firm and start making a six-figure income. And so it might actually be good. It might I haven't heard that side of how the partners might just leverage AI to not have to worry about the associates.
I'm already saying it. And in fact, I've done some economic modeling on what will happen, but I was going to tell you that partner has no clue how to value and fee bill. They don't. And even if I went to them and said, you should do this, and I've got my pricing team here to help you, they'd go, no, the client doesn't know how to deal with it. I'm like, okay, you're right. You would have to be proactive and go to the client and persuade them. And 99% of these partners are not going to do that until their income starts dropping, which is what is going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things where, for me, and litigation, I still think you could do this with litigation. And maybe Toby, before you start working for another company, you and I could find a project that we could actually get somebody to pay us to do this for. Because I would just genuinely have fun doing this, and I'd probably do it for free, but I'd rather not. And that is model out, like actually learning the cost that's disassociated from hours spent on litigation. Because at least for me, for my practice, which is not litigation at all, I mean, there are some deadlines for some things, closings and transactions and all that. I know what my costs are because most of them are fixed costs. And I know the larger you get as a business, the more complicated it gets. But even if I had employees, I'd still know what my fixed costs are for salary, benefits, et cetera. And right now, I have a spreadsheet. It's just like a Google Sheet. I'm sure there's software that lets you do this, but I have all my outgoing monthly and annual and quarterly spend and all my incoming recurring revenue. And it's just, the incoming revenue has to outgo, be larger than the outgoing monthly and quarterly and annual revenue. And my costs are controlled for. And then it becomes not a one-off per client, per instance, per matter type analysis of cost, but it's a firm-wide cost. And that's easy for me to understand as a solo. I have to imagine extrapolating. You could still do this for a larger and larger practice, even if it gets a little more complicated. What do you think?
You're just about to get some free consulting. So you're falling into a trap that I would want you to think about. So what you just said to me was all revenue is good because you know your fixed costs. And as long as you're generating revenue above that. Now, most law firm partners think that way exactly because, and I don't know if you have any accounting background, most large firms are run on a cash basis, which is utter insanity. They are billion-dollar operations run on a cash basis. But what that drives is a cash basis thinking. And I actually have a new way, I have my spreadsheet handy, to demonstrate this to large firm lawyers. So number 2 on the AmLaw list is Latham and Watkins. And their revenue per lawyer is about almost $1.7 million. Number 3 is DLA Piper, and their revenue per lawyer is $840,000. All revenue is not the same. They both have about the same top line revenue, but one of them is extracting far more profits. And this is why you need to understand where your profit comes from. Now, I don't know a lot about what you do, but there are probably different tasks or different segments of what you do. And some of it may be highly, highly profitable. And some of it may be unprofitable. And absent you knowing where that is occurring, you can't take action to improve it or to even say, okay, we're going to focus our business. I'm going to say, let's say there's 4 categories of whatever you do. And you find out that in category 2 and category 3, that's where all of your profit comes from. You might re-examine your business and go, do we need to still be in 1 and 4? And maybe you do to some degree to get 2 and 3, but absent knowing that's where your actual margins come from, you're not going to make the best business decisions. So that's one of my things I just pound on the table these days is large law firms make massive business decisions with zero view into profit. And that's not a good business.
I'm so glad that we got that from you, Toby. Because I think for a lot of my listeners, they absolutely need to hear that because a lot of them are also still billing time. Right. And they want to do subscription or they want to do alternative fees. I'm actually on an accrual basis because I also don't do work before I get paid.
Good.
So I get all my money. And in Illinois, our legal ethics of it all allows fixed fees, which is subscription is a recurring fixed fee, to go directly into an operating account. So that's expressly allowed. So that's fantastic.
Well done.
Yeah. Well done, Illinois. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Illinois Supreme Court, for that one. But like my annual expenses, I'm looking at for my law firm, my projected 2024 annual expenses, not including any advertising or marketing, which I will do like a one-off sponsor a local event or whatever. But most of my business development is from existing clients, referrals, or public speaking that I am asked to do or that I make up myself and I do seminars, local seminars and online seminars, right? So $6,605.72. So my costs are so low that, yes, I do have more profitable clients than others. So like my business clients where I'm the true fractional GC and it's not exactly all you could eat subscription, but it's like, okay, we think it's around 10 projects or 15 projects a month. So it's going to be X amount of money. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to nickel and dime you, know, and some months it might only be 3 projects and some months it might be 17. And, it all sort of balances out. And if any party feels like they're being unfair, or they're getting an unfair shake, we'll change the monthly subscription price. It's not a big deal. I could just focus on those clients, but I've got people, entrepreneurs starting at $20 a month, $50 a page. And even though I've only been doing this for 2 years and 3 months, they have found more success and they've gone up to paying just hundreds of dollars a month, right? And so like I am creating a pipeline. It's certainly more profitable for me to just find the businesses that could pay me a few thousand a month and just focus on them. But like thinking long term with subscription, like when you're thinking lifetime value, like that's what you're thinking, right? You're thinking long term. You're not thinking I get one bite of the apple. You're thinking I'm going to eat this whole apple. I'm going to eat this bushel of apples. So like I agree with what you're saying, but I just think at least serving the latent legal market, I think that I could get away with such low costs And I'm leveraging AI, like you said. Like Paxton is my AI tool of choice, but I use I use the free ones too in other ways. And Adobe has AI now that I'm also leveraging I'm already paying for it. So I feel like when your costs are so low, your annual expenses are so low, like other than taxes, whatever I decide to stock away into an IRA, it's like everything else is profit. And I don't need to be the most profitable I could be. I need to be profitable enough to sustain the lifestyle and then be able to stock more away into savings and investments and whatever, right?
Well, as long as you're understanding that and your eyes are open on it, yes. But if you've got other people listening to that and they're just thinking, oh, I'll charge a subscription fee. What I heard from you, and I liked your lifetime value. Absolutely love that, because that means you get it. The term that comes to mind is not the exact right term, loss leader.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of lawyers who go, oh, it's a loss leader. And I'm like, I don't think you know what that means. But for you, what you do is you have a lot of companies that come in at the small level, and then some of those pop up. And if you didn't have that pipeline at the small level, they're not going to pop up to the more profitable level. So that's that's the pipeline of business for you. So it is a smart thing to have. That's when you say, yes, we're going to keep segment one because we know one feeds two and three. Absolutely. But then you might say, okay, how do I increase the conversion to two and three? But it sounds like you're on that track now. But I'm always cautious because in these conversations, I'm usually in these conversations talking to somebody who actually gets it. It's like talking with a Jeff Carr, but most people are not in that category. And so when they hear this stuff, they're like, oh, I'll just do this and I'll get rich. Yeah.
Right. Right. And loss leader is a good thing that you brought up, because I don't think of it as a loss leader. I think of it as, instead of paying to market to clients, they pay me for the $20 a month, right? So I think of it as a marketing earn instead of a marketing spend. Would you rather make money marketing or spend money marketing? Well, for $20 a month, whenever my clients have any legal anything come up, who do they call? Me. Because they're already paying me $20 a month. Now, if I were to be billing by the hour for these 15-minute calls that I let them schedule with me, yeah, sure, I could be making more money. But the reality is when they call you, they bring you more work.
They wouldn't call you.
Right. They wouldn't call you, and they bring you more work, which I charge flat fee for at the $20 a month. I charge, either per page, $50 flat fee per page, or if it's a thing I do like asset purchase agreements, I charge, which are usually sub-$1 million acquisitions. I charge another $800 a month for my $100 a month subscribers and up. So it's $900 a month, and then that's it. And they know exactly what it's going to cost them, right? And so it's a subscription add-on that adds on during the transaction and goes off at the closing. And then they're still subscribed at a level after that, because there's things, they bought a business, they sold a business, there's post-closing compliance things that they want to talk to a lawyer about. And then maybe they spend that money on buying a new business, or maybe now they're a business owner and they have other questions for their lawyer, right? So so that's how I'm sort of gaming the system. But we're almost out of time. And I know you and I could probably talk forever about this. So I'll give you some last words, and then I have a fun question for you.
Okay. We nibbled on Gen AI. I think Gen AI is going to significantly impact the current business model of anybody who bills by the hour. So you will be very, very wise to learn about Gen AI. You want to be the lawyer who augments yourself with Gen AI. You don't want to be the one to go, oh, we can't do this, there's ethics, there's all this stuff. Those excuses always exist. So I would highly recommend your listeners figure out, start playing with it, and then get more and more thoughtful about how you can use it in your practice. So there's my final piece of counsel.
Good. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I've had a lot of AI focused episodes, so everyone go check those out. Toby, my last question for you is a fun one. Is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
I will say no, because it's never on the menu under the sandwiches section.
Interesting. Interesting. So if you went to a restaurant and under sandwiches it did list hot dogs, would you change your mind?
If it became the preponderance of menus, yes. But I've never, because I'm a fan of the burger. I enjoy a hot dog, but I'm a fan of the burger, and I have noticed that there's a burger section and there's a sandwich section on menus.
Interesting.
A little crossover. But so that's how So how did I do? Is there what's
That's a first. That's a first. I mean, I've received almost 100 different answers to this question, and that is a first. So I like it, and I'm going to start paying attention at restaurants where they put the hot dog now. That's great.
well, I'm an economist by education, but I think you act like an economist. It's just I'm always looking at market data and trying to read signs about where I think things are going to go. In fact, when I get back to a law firm, the stuff I'm going to look at, like let's say, because I have a car problem, that this law firm does business in the car industry. That'll be easy for me because I'll say, okay, here are the trends in the car industry that are going to impact their legal needs over the next 3 to 5 years. So that's what we need to be positioned to do. So
Products liability and self-driving vehicles, right? Like when the elevator became, independently operated from a person, right? Like it's going to totally revolutionize the personal injury space.
Agree, but if you think about it, the term in the industry, my son works for Rivian. The term in the industry is mobility. And what it is a whole bunch of new technologies that are emerging, and auto companies are going to have to become tech companies. In fact, there is already a very interesting lawsuit against General Motors because they're hoovering up all this data with their black boxes in the car. They're selling that to a data broker who is then selling that to an insurance company who is then raising premiums on people's car insurance. This is happening in Florida, and the people figured out what was happening. So they turned around and they're suing a class action. They're suing General Motors for selling that data.
Interesting. I mean, I would think that, we could spend a whole other hour on this. So we're just going to leave it at that. If people wanted to find you, Toby, what's the best way for them to reach out and find you?
LinkedIn's the easiest one. Well, LinkedIn's just the easiest.
Yeah. So obviously link to that in the show notes. Toby Brown, thanks again so much for coming on Law Subscribed.
Thanks for having me. This was a fun conversation.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.